welcome everyone. Anyone who still can't hear, please text. And you can't hear, you didn't get that message. Okay, so what I was saying is the Master Gardeners have raised a community garden started with raised beds. The plots are located behind the Sequatchie Valley or the Sequatchie Emergency Center and the Sequatchie County Health Department. It's in the area between those. Plots are $10, and I think there's 8 or 9 plots left for anybody who might be interested or know someone who wants to try gardening on a small scale before they get started. So tonight's talk is on plot preparation, site preparation, and what I intend to cover is both raised beds and in grain. So since we've had a few technical hitches already, if anyone cannot see the presentation, please let me know. So let's get started. I think a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago now, several of us may have had plots or gardens that looked a little like this, a little ice and snow. Not that that would hurt anything, but after that cold spell, and then we have 70-degree weather, now's the time to be thinking about getting things ready before you start planting. So the first thing you need to do is to just assess the area. So questions you might think about or look at is what is the condition of the soil? If you're using a raised bed, the media. Sunlight is key and important. We talked about that in the first class, but you need an area that gets plenty of sunlight, preferably afternoon sunlight, at least 6 hours or more. So 6 to 8 hours more if possible for your site. Something else to think about is previous uses for the site. What was there? What did you grow in that site last year? Was it tomatoes, potatoes that you may need to consider with rotation? And of course, anything else that you might need to consider regarding your site in your neighborhood. So a good site, just to quickly review, is one that, as I said, gets full sunlight, little or no slope. If it has a little slope, that's fine. It does help with drainage. It needs to be easily accessible. And by that, I mean somewhere where you can keep an eye on it regularly. And then with good soil. So as you're evaluating your site, what's there now? If it's the old garden site, it may be growing some winter weeds. If it's a site you didn't use last year as a garden, it may have a lot of weeds. Of course, what's pictured here is Dow's grass. And actually, the weeds you have may indicate something about the soil site. Dow's grass will grow in areas that's compacted and fairly dry. If you got sedges, and sedges look like grass, except they have square or triangular stems, that would indicate poor drainage or just some poor conditions in general, maybe something that is not very rich in nutrients. But just evaluate the site and what's there. Think about what you did last year, as already noted. What weed control methods did you use last year? And if it's a new area that you're going to convert to a garden, did you spray it for lawn weeds? What did you use as a fertilizer last year? And how much did you put? All can be things to consider as you prepare for this season. First thing, no matter what you plan to do, a soil test may be necessary. Now, if you did a soil test last year it may be good for this year, but if you've not tested, now is the time to think about it. You're going to need to take several subsamples from the area. So if it's a garden plot, just zigzag your way around the plot, taking samples from the top 6 inches of the soil. You can dig a plug out of the soil with a shovel or a hand spade. Anything that's not soil, you can discard. Mix all of this in a clean bucket and dry it before you package and send it. And we have the kits in our office to do a soil test. Something else to think about as you're preparing for the gardening season is just to have a plan. It doesn't need to be as elaborate as this one I found, but just kind of sketch out where things are going to go in the garden for the coming year. That one will help you place the plants when you get ready to plant. It may determine how and where you fertilize and how much you fertilize, and possibly how you control the weeds. So a good garden plan, of course, will help you save time, make the best use of your space. It can save you some work if you plan and place things where it's convenient to access them, to keep them weeded, watered, and so on. And it could save you money because you know what you need and you can go purchase those items. In garden plans, a well-planned garden can increase yields and extend the overall gardening season. So a good plan and knowing what you're planning on doing is going to allow you to get the most out of your garden site. So as you're preparing the site and you're planning, think about crop rotations. Well, first of all, you need to know what you grew last year in a given area. And then group the crops as shown in this chart, and then rotate through, there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different groups here. And one of the reasons why you would want to rotate is to decrease pests, weeds, and diseases. Tomatoes, the peppers, potatoes, and eggplant are all in the Solanaceous family. And a lot of the diseases that we see with tomatoes, particularly late blight and early blight, are soil-borne. So rotating those crops kind of breaks the cycle of the diseases and some of the insect pests. Then you've got corn listed there under the grains. Corn's a heavy feeder, which means it's going to be a crop that may need to be side dressed, some additional fertilizer throughout the growing season. So grouping these crops together can help you in managing them as well as said, controlling diseases and pests. So getting the site ready. First of all, we need to manage any sod, grass, particularly if it's a new site or a site that's not being used in a couple of years. Remove any debris that may be on the site. This may be leaves that's blown in, plant material from last year. And if you plan to till the site, then you need to do so and work it down to a nice, smooth seed bed. Be ready for planting. Also, there will be some pre-plant fertilization that may be necessary. If you soil test, the soil test will certainly give you those recommendations. A general application for the entire garden. And then, of course, the soil test will also follow up with specific recommendations for the crops that you're going to be growing. So when you soil test, we recommend you follow those guidelines. For the pre-plant, that would, of course, be a broadcast throughout the whole garden. And our soil test results also give you both organic and chemical fertilizer recommendations. But a pre-plant fertilizing program will put everything on a even basis. Also, before I leave that, Soil test will also give you lime recommendations based on your soil pH. And if it calls for lime, then the time to actually do it as soon as you get the results back. So applying lime as soon as possible ahead of the growing season and incorporating it if possible is a good recommendation. So do we really need to till? Well, the answer is possibly. One of the things that tillage does is break up compaction. So if it's been in an area where there's a heavy traffic or you've had a lot of traffic in the garden, foot traffic or even equipment, then tilling will help with that compaction. It incorporates organic matter and it also disturbs weeds. So if this is an area that is got a lot of weed pressure, then tillage may be a good way to control and manage those weeds. I did not put this bullet there, but sometimes tillage is a good way to break the disease and insect uh, cycle, particularly those diseases and insects that are soil borne or the case of insects winter in the soil. So for raised beds, I would suggest following the same basic plan. Take a look at the bed, have a plan, what goes in a particular bed at a particular time. We do have a media test. It's a little different than our soil test. It requires a gallon Ziploc bag worth of media, and it's about twice the actual cost because raised bed media is typically organic matter and not mineral soil. So the type of test they have to do on the media is a little different, and it is well worth the uh, the cost, particularly if you've had problems with the raised beds. But what you need to think about in the case of raised beds is the condition of the beds. You need to replace any of the sides and boards if it's wooden. You need to make any repairs to the raised bed itself. Organic matter will settle, and the fines typically will wash their way down toward the bottom. So the media will settle and become compacted. So you may need to turn the bed and loosen the media. You may need to actually replace the media if it's been used for a couple or 3 years. So take a look at the media and what is in the raised bed and decide if it needs to be replaced, uh, stirred and turned, and additional media added. I've already mentioned this. Half a gallon of potting media for the analysis. And I didn't mention the price, but it is $35 per sample. So raised bed, your raised beds can still have a few weeds. There are wind-blown weed seeds, birds and other things may carry weeds in. So you need to remove those weeds. Take your shovel, turn it to the bottom of the bed and loosen up the media that's in it. If you do a media test, it may recommend some amendments to be made to the bed. So that would be something you would need to do in some cases before you plant. And as I said, you can refill and actually replace any media that you might be seeing. There's a lot of resources and I'm going to actually take a few minutes and share for this. On the UT4 webpage, there is a garden planning, plant preparation, and planting work guidebook. And let's see if this will take me to this website. May have to unshare for just a second, but figure out they did with that web page. Okay, so this is the UT Hort web page. Any and all the resources that you may need for vegetables and herbs, fruits, landscaping, turf grass, and then house plants and hydroponics, greenhouses, native plants and wildlife, and other topics as well. But under the vegetable and herbs category, you will find these drop-down menus with several publications in each one, including a garden calendar. And I do have a few printed copies of this vegetable gardening calendar. So here's a publication on planning and planting, which I borrowed quite a bit for tonight's discussion. But it talks about the things you need to do in preparation. And also, and we mentioned this, some of the timing for the plants in selecting. There's also I lost it. I had it earlier. This section on small space gardening. So he talks about using raised beds. So it gives you some insight on building and using raised beds. So there's a lot of information that can be found on the UT Hort website. Another site that I want to suggest is this one, the Family Plot Gardening in the Mid-South. It is actually a PBS TV show out of Memphis in the Shelby County area. It's the one who conducts the program, hosts the program. And you will find all kinds of videos on all kinds of topics, square foot gardening, information on soil testing, gardening resources, and you can search the site and find links to both publications, not just from the University of Tennessee, but from Mississippi and neighboring states. Well, so preparing your soil, and here's gardening site planning. So there's links to their publications, and then it goes into others. These are short 2-3 minute videos on topics, everything from pruning demonstrations to planting demonstrations, harvesting, and so on. So that's also an excellent resource for anyone who might be interested in more information on a given topic. But the key to getting ready in your site is to make sure you have an area that is clean and free of weeds, that you've soil tested and are planning or amending according to that soil test. And then having a plan to where things will go in your garden. And to be honest with you, that's about all that one really needs to think about. So this may be a good time to unshare and see if anyone has some questions, and then we can discuss going further, other things. So you can unmute if you wish. No questions? Angie, you
Hey,
got a
Sheldon.
question? Hey,
Hey, Sheldon, it's Angie.
yeah,
Sorry, I tried to put my video on so you could at least see me, but I don't
I
see
can.
me. Oh,
You,
you can't. Okay,
yeah,
well, I
I can
can't.
see you.
This is all kinds of technical issues tonight. Okay, can I understood the points that you gave us on tilling,
Right.
right? Breaks up compassion, disturbs weeds, distributes organic matter, breaks up disease and insect cycle. So if you're someone like me who is new to having a property, I'm new, relatively new on the property. It's just former pasture, and we've done nothing other than mow for a year and a half. Aside from doing the soil test, which we've done, how do you figure out, how do you determine if, other than seeing some certain weeds that can identify compaction, how else do you tell whether or not to do it?
Well, how easy is it to get a shovel into
Oh,
that site? You
uh-huh.
know,
As long as I don't hit rock, it's easy.
okay. So that's usually a pretty good indication of compaction. Is how easily the soil is to work. Turning it with a shovel or just sticking something in the soil. Now, granted, if it's in sod and it's a thick sod, then you'll have to push through that root layer of the sod. But once you do that, uh, it's the soil's loose and it'll turn very easily.
Okay.
The chances are, just from what you described and having actually seen that area, you're not likely to see a lot of compaction. Compaction usually comes when there's a concentrated force in a on the so heavy equipment following the same path
Oh, okay. Yeah.
time at time. Or
Mhm.
in a garden, your foot where you walk between the rows.
Okay.
And that tends to be where the compaction would really occur.
Okay.
If you had a lot of heavy equipment in an area, that may do it. So sometimes after construction on a new home, the lawn itself, with all the equipment they've had in, the contractors' vehicles in and out, that you can see some compaction in the soil. But most fields, it's not likely unless you, like I said, there's a path that's being followed through that field.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey,
So,
hey,
hello,
Sheldon, can you hear me? It's Terry.
yes.
Hey,
Mhm.
sorry, I'm having some tech issues. I've had to get off of my I was using my tablet the last time, but now I've had to move to my desk. Don't know what's going on, but I have to check it out later.
Okay.
So I missed, unfortunately, I've missed like the first part of this. Have you talked to any about initial irrigation issues?
I did not get into irrigation. I just talking about planning the site, getting the weeds that are currently there under control, and turning, plowing, if that's something they intend to do, and then getting that initial uh, fertilizer application. But
Okay.
we can certainly address, and I've got questions in the chat too we need to address. But if you're going to be planning, that's where a good garden plan comes in. If you plan to irrigate, whether it's dragging the hose out or actually putting in an irrigation system, having a plan where different things are, where the irrigation is going, where the hoses, the source of water is located, is key. So, there's on that UT Ford, there's actually probably more information and better information than I can give you off the top of my head on planting and irrigation for gardens. And you can buy those kits from various gardening sources, both online and I think even in some stores that are fairly inexpensive. Some of them can be reused for a couple of years and are fairly easy to put together and use. Now, the more sophisticated the irrigation system, the more sophisticated the pump and even filters. But for most home garden systems, these systems are fairly straightforward. May need a filter to get out particulate, particularly if you're on a well. But if you are not on the well and using city water, so to speak, or municipal water source, it's been filtered. There's not a lot of that would clog up the irrigation system. So, initially the thing is just know where the water's coming from in the source and how you're going to get water to the plants. If it's close enough and you want to carry it in buckets, that's fine. If you're pulling the hose, then that would work too. That answer your question, Terry?
Yeah, it just, it's something you do want to think about, especially before you plant and the plants start getting big, because trying to put if you're all of a sudden realizing you need an irrigation system in July with your tomatoes, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, that's a little late to be thinking about it. Most of these irrigation systems will be directed at the root. So even if you have other means of carrying buckets or dragging hose, you don't want to wet the plant themselves. You want to water at the base of the plant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had a question in chat, getting started with raised beds. In that publication that I mentioned on the UT Hort website has a lot of information. But if you're getting started with a raised bed, pick an area that's level or fairly level. Decide how big the beds need to be. And a good rule of thumb on the width of the plant is that you need to be able to reach either all the way across the bed or more than halfway across the bed. And I say that you can work from either side. And if you can reach more than halfway across the bed from either side, then you've got access to the entire bed and makes it easier to harvest and makes it easier to pull any weeds that may come. Now, if you just getting started and not had any prior testing done to the media that you have, you can collect that media and, as I said, bag it and send it. But a good raised bed mix is not straight compost. In fact, you can mix it compost with some other pine bark. You can use peat moss. Sand could work. Perlite, vermiculite is also a good option. Those are probably not the best options in a raised bed. They work really great in pots and containers. The using a little native soil or native topsoil mixed in with the compost is not a bad thing. I know part of the reason why most folks are wanting to get away from in-ground to raised bed is to not have that soil. But the native soils in topsoil, it's a mineral soil. It would have the nutrients that you need, and it would also improve some of the drainage that it could be an issue in a raised bed. So a mix of topsoil, compost, maybe wood. Well, I wouldn't necessarily go with wood chips, but pine bark or peat moss. And there's recipes in that publication on the UT Hort website for raised bed media. I would also suggest that whatever media mix you decide to use and what recipe you decide to follow for your raised bed is that the entire raised bed be that material. And this is because of the drainage. You want a nice uniform material throughout that raised bed and in the root zone that you're going to be growing, so that water will move evenly through the raised bed. If you decide to put something down to lessen the depth of the media, because it's not necessarily the cheapest option to buy the materials, what you've created is two different layers of material, and the water will fill the first layer completely to saturation before it moves into the second layer. And it doesn't matter what fineness of material, maybe a very fine material on top and pea gravel in the next. It will, or you put pea gravel on top and they're really fine on the bottom. Either way, it's going to saturate a layer at a time as it moves through the bottom. So having a uniform material throughout the depth of that raised bed is key. Some of the problems that we run into with straight compost is salts. The mineral material is in a salt form, and it can be fairly high in some compost, and that can be detrimental to your plants. Sometimes the pH in those materials can vary outside the range of what's acceptable. It's not that often in compost, but it can. So finding a good source or making the source yourself and then mixing it according to those recipes is recommended. And I can, and that's, if I didn't answer that question, let me know. Whoever typed that one into the mix, into the chat box. The mix is garden soil, pink moss, and compost in equal volumes is what's recommended for a raised bed. If you don't test, then that's not the end of the world, and your plants may do just fine. But having a good media test, particularly if it's a source of material you're not familiar with, or you've used it for a couple of years, would be a good idea. So somebody's asking about edible things you can grow in a container. Hanging pots. There's some things you might put in hanging pots. The problem with hanging pots is the depth of that pot. And you see that online if you watch videos on gardening. They put things in hanging pots, hang them upside down. Some of that may work, some of it may not. But containers, there's a lot of garden varieties that can grow in a container. A tomato, a traditional tomato plant, needs approximately a 5-gallon bucket's worth of soil or media to grow in the space of about a 5-gallon bucket. Now, the 5-gallon bucket approach is going to have the roots in a more compact area, where if you put them in a raised bed or even in the soil, they're going to spread out more. But you can still grow them, and I've grown them in 5-gallon buckets and done fine. You would want something that does not get very large. So a determinate variety works much better than an indeterminate. And there is container varieties of just about any vegetable I can think of: cucumbers, peppers, tomatoes, that you can find in the catalogs. I mentioned in our last, back in January, our last class, the variety trials. And the UT Hort website has links to those variety trials. And they have trialed several compact container varieties for tomatoes and peppers. Squash, there is some that will be more compact than other varieties that you can find. Watermelons, pumpkins, corn, okra, some of those plants that just tend to grow and get big, either in height or vining, don't do well in containers. Corn and okra can work in a raised bed, but that becomes a little more of a challenge than in ground. Because one, you've got, let's say, 6, 8 inches, a foot of height for the raised bed. Then I've had okra that I couldn't reach the top of it in the end of the season. I'd have to bend the plant over to reach the okra. Now, part of that I could have probably helped by pruning the okra back just a little and topping it. But it was doing so well, I just let it grow and I could, pull the stalks down gently and harvest the okra. But getting ready for the gardening season, site preparation, which is what our primary topic, it's just making sure that things are ready. Now, if you want to go with a no-till option, that's doable. You're still going to have to create a row in your garden. You're still going to have to disturb the soil to some degree, but it will work. Again, weeds can be an issue if you don't turn those under to start with and break that weed cycle from the start. But no-till gardening has been and still is a popular thing to do. Mulching the area will help a lot in controlling weeds if you go with a no-till.
So it's Terry again. I know that sometime this year, one of the localities is offering information over at Milan that's going to be offering a no-till program.
Yeah. They don't do a whole lot of gardening on that particular field day. The Milan No-Till Field Day is an every other year event, and it is focused on the large row crop farms in West Tennessee.
Okay.
So they do not, some of the principles that they apply and use can work on a smaller scale, but they're talking 1,000-acre cotton fields and soybean and corn at that particular field day. So it's primarily focused on row crops. As far as field days for gardening and gardeners go, there's a couple, three of you on here, I think, that have been, is in August at the Plateau Research Center in Crossville, Tennessee. And they have a gardening focused field day for the end of August. And if you get my newsletters, I think the last one had those field days listed and should have had the date for that gardening class. But they have an all day, starts like at 8:30 in the morning, goes well into the afternoon with different speakers and different things to see regarding gardening. And those that have been in the past said it was well worth the time to go. They also have a field day at the Plateau Experiment Station a few days before that when it's called Steak and Potatoes. It's focused more on commercial production, fruits and vegetable production, and beef cattle primarily. But there is several things that one can learn from attending that one as well, particularly when it comes to fruits and vegetables. They talked a lot about disease control and on a larger scale than most gardeners, but certainly, as I said, principles still apply, particularly when it comes to crop rotations, site preparations, proper irrigation, fertilizing according to soil test recommendations. If you pick the right site, keep the plant watered and fertilized accordingly, and keep the competition down, you're going to go a long way to having a successful crop. Any other thoughts, questions? Terry, you weren't the only one that had technical issues to start with today. I had 5 minutes into my presentation before I realized nobody could hear me.
Oh gosh. It's just going around today. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is. It's yeah, just you know, just been one of those days for me. So one thing after another, and then yeah, I get on and I set up with my tablet and like just like I did last time, and it's like no bueno. I'm like, come on, come on, come on, come on. And finally, I was just okay. I gotta get this going. So came into my office, but we won't have my camera on here because I don't want you to see my messy office. So there we go.
Hey, Sheldon, I have another question.
Okay.
Um, if going back to the garden plots,
Okay.
do people have the option if they don't want to do a garden, of edible garden, can they do a flower garden?
Sure.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, I don't see why not.
Yeah, are we
Okay.
talking at the community garden?
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
the flowers can bring in pollinators,
Yeah,
especially
because
certain types of flowers, which helps everybody.
right. Because I'm
Um,
thinking if there is an extra one, then I'm going to go ahead and get one of the plots, and I'm going to do pollinating flowers.
you could do a bed of culinary herbs, to stuff to toss in, to do some, I grow basil every year because I like a good caprese salad, and thyme, all the basic, really, things that, if you're a cook, like I'm a cook,
Uh-huh.
fresh herbs are a wonderful thing to go to. You can have edibles and flowers if that's your wish. So absolutely. We have some restrictions on what you can grow, but not a lot.
Okay.
But yeah, that flowers are absolutely fine. If you
Yeah,
just
I think
want to do
that's
flowers to have cut flowers in your house,
yeah.
absolutely. Because
Yeah,
it
I think
still
it's a
can
good
be
idea.
an opportunity for other people to see this and
Mhm.
for us to all learn together.
In a perfect world, I would take this, what is it, a 4x6,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
I'd take this 4x6 pot, and I would have ornamental, I would have flowers, I would have herbs, and a little section of cover crop, because I've never done a cover crop, but I would imagine if it's a cover crop, it's somewhat invasive, or not necessarily.
Not necessarily. It
Okay.
depends on what you would choose for cover crops.
Yeah.
But that can be a whole topic for another discussion.
Right.
Terry actually brought up one thing before I lose my thought on this. She had asked in the chat, what about containers on the
Uh-huh.
porch? That's the perfect place to put the herbs.
Oh yes, yeah, I do that
Yeah,
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
because so you may not want to run all the way out to the garden. Pick you a little thyme or basil or even mint to go into your cooking while you're cooking. So fresh herbs in containers
Oh yeah.
is really an excellent choice.
It's what's called a kitchen garden, where you just have
Yeah,
those little bitty things that you want to toss into in on top of your salad or into a soup or something like that. So it's a good thing to have. So
so
yeah. Because
cover
if you have it out in the garden, by the time you get out there and you snip it, you'll see something else that you need to do in the garden and something else you need to do in the garden. By the time you get inside, forget it. Dinner's done.
yeah,
You
yeah,
passed the
or
dinner
burn.
hour.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, having containers and growing herbs in pots, mint is definitely something you would want in a pot
yeah,
because it
oh
tends to spread
Yeah.
quite a bit and take over any space you give it. But
yeah,
going back to your cover crop question, there is, depending on the time of the year, several things you can grow as cover crops and use that space that you're not growing, vegetables or other garden uh, plants in. Some of those can be pretty tall and work really well in an in ground garden. But we raised zinnias on the part of the garden last year that we did not need. Well, we had a couple of rows of zinnias in it. Sunflowers
Mm-hmm.
was something else that was planted. Um, and then as the summer progressed and some things were coming out, we put in buckwheat.
Buckwheat?
Buckwheat. It gets tall
Okay.
and it will grow, mature, flower, and set seed in 45 days or to 50 days, depending on the variety and the conditions. So, we could get 3, 4 crops, put it in the spring of the year, and it would grow and bloom 3, 4 times during the course of the season. We just
Okay.
mow it off and kind of take a rake and loosen it up the area so the seed come in contact. It reseed itself too, in 4 to 4/7.
And this
So
is something
for
we're gonna discuss later in the year, because it's something we will likely be doing as we shut down the beds, to put a cover crop in.
Oh,
Put a cover-
fabulous. That's
Yeah.
great.
But then your winter cover crops is going to be a whole different set of plants. And we'll talk more about cover crops and putting the bed or garden to rest for the winter
The
as we go
rest,
through
yeah.
the series. Yeah, close to that time. But the biggest thing I think was we're running close to being an hour. And I didn't have a lot of slides. The more I thought about it, the more I thought, site preparation is just making sure you've got a soil test or know what you need in fertilizer and get the weeds under control and know where you're going to plant. And then as Terry pointed out, while you're planting, knowing, where your water is going to come from and how you're going to get it to your plants.
Yep.
We just carried buckets, that seems big.
That's hard work, Sheldon. I'm not
Well,
into
you run
that.
the garden hose. You run the garden hose as close to it as you possibly can. I mean, actually,
Hey, Sheldon, is
things-
Ken.
yes.
Could you talk a little about the orientation of the garden as far as the rows? I think usually north-south. How significant is that?
Well, you think about it, the sun moves from east to west. And if you've got your rows running north to south, then the sun's going to hit all sides of that row. If you run it east to west, it's going to hit the end of the row over the
Right.
top of the row, and then on the end again in the evening. So that north-south orientation is going to, have the sun hitting the plant throughout the day on the sides of the rows. But, I probably could have put a diagram together, but you just picture running the rows north and south and the sun moving over it and having space enough for you to walk between the rows. And depending on how tall those rows get, of course, corn or okra would shade more than, squash, cucumbers, or such. That sun, if it's, here's my camera. Yeah, there it is. The sun can hit the side. So if it's north-south, it's going over it this way. So, you're looking at north-south, the sun can go. If you're east-west, the sun's going this way, and it's not getting on the sides of the rows.
Yeah. And then secondarily, you try to put the lower crops on the east side versus the west side, the height of them.
Yes, that would be fine. Or put the taller plants in the middle.
The middle.
Well, in the very middle, so that they get
Okay,
that
yeah.
get the afternoon sun. You put the tall plants on the west side of the garden, then it's going to shade throughout the afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Comes in. Just think about, our tall plant's going to shade. And there's some varieties of corn, it's not going to be very tall. So, if you move out a few feet away from that and to the east or the west of your corn row and plants, it's probably not going to shade a whole lot. Okra, I've had it 6, 8 foot tall. So it can
Yeah.
be pretty high and shading quite a bit. that's where a plan comes in. Just think about how tall is this plant going to be, and is it going to shade something next to it? And of course, you want to plant corn in a block, not long straight rows. So if you're going to plant a 10-foot row, it might be better to plant two 5-foot rows instead of a whole
Mhm.
long 10 for pollination purposes. Corn's wind pollinated. So the shorter the rows and the wider the block, more likely you are to get pollination. You'll see bees working uh, corn, but they're not really pollinating. They're taking the pollen, really, and for their use. They're not really spreading it for the corn itself. So wind is the primary means for which corn's pollinated. That and gravity. Because the tassel at the top's the male and the silk's the female.
Okay, thank you.
And Ken, thinking about your question, another step, there are some plants that can tolerate a little shade in the
Mhm.
garden. So, if they get,
Especially once it gets hot.
yes, especially once it gets hot in the afternoon. So, if they are in a section of the garden that they get shaded late afternoon or shaded by something you've planted in the garden, it's probably not the end of the world. A lot of your cucurbits and some of your cooler season plants can tolerate a little more shade. Tomatoes can that they don't like that extremely hot late afternoon sun. But tomatoes also need a good 8+ hours of sunlight throughout the day to really grow and mature like they should. So you don't want them shaded too much, but last hour or so of the day, it's not going to be the end of the world if they are shaded.
Mm.
And then being shaded, in the late evening may also be a good thing for you going out there in the end of the day to harvest.
All right. Well, I think we're all just about out of time. Does anybody
Yeah.
else have any questions before we close this out? Do want to remind everyone that about the community garden.
That's where I started, actually.
Yeah, and we also want to remind them that we are the Master Gardeners, which is a program in as part of University of Tennessee and the Department of Agriculture. And our job is to help educate people in the community about good practices. And so that's what we're out there doing. And we'll be out there. And we'll be letting them know when the next educational program starts. And right now, we're planning to be out at the community garden on the 1st of March, but that is also very weather dependent. And we know this time of year, you just can't be sure.
No.
So, but if you're interested, please stop in to the extension and check us out.
All right. Any other questions?
Sheldon, one more question. And it is
Okay.
clear that that yes, we are master gardeners and not tech support. What was
Yeah, that
that?
includes me.
Yeah, what was that medium mix for raised beds again? Garden soil, peat moss, and what was the third?
Compost.
Compost. Thank you.
Equal portions by volume.
Mm-hmm. Super.
I've
Thank you
seen
so
some.
much, Sheldon.
Yeah, I've
Thanks,
seen several
Sheldon.
put pine bark with peat moss
I'm sorry, what was that?
instead of peat moss.
Pine bark? Okay.
Yes.
Pine bark.
If you go buy a bag of some high dollar potting mix, at a garden supply center, it'll have Hidemark in it. A lot of
Okay.
times, it helps with. It does help a little with drainage. And I said, you know, you need to be careful of having that nice even mix for drainage purposes. But it also helps with compaction. You know, keeps, you know, it's a bulky material, so it'll help keep it from compacting as well. Fake compost sometimes will definitely compact, hold water a lot, you know, more than we would want. Stay wet.
Right. All right. Thank you so much, Sheldon.
You're welcome. Thank you all.